As I said in our last lesson, the church in North America is in a lot of trouble. A new statistic that has come out, or new to me, I should say, is that since 2004, we have lost from the faith, not the church, but from Christianity, approximately 3 million people every single year since 2004. People have quit Christianity. They didn't just quit the church, they quit Jesus. When polled and asked, what is your religious background, etc., they are saying something other than Christian. And as I pointed out last time, the majority of those people are joining the church of none. No affiliation with any religion whatsoever. The church, though, is in a specific area of trouble because the church, if not for nothing else, we have a really negative reputation. We have, if you ask people about Jesus, an unchurched person about Jesus, there may be some interest, and in fact we know that through surveys that people are interested in learning more about Jesus, but they have zero interest in learning anything really about the church, that the church's reputation is, again, quite negative. And that's a real problem in most mainline churches, and indeed, in reality, in most churches across America, because most churches don't practice evangelism in terms of Christianity. They practice evangelism in terms of Churchianity. And there's a huge difference between Churchianity and Christianity. In Churchianity, there's a focus on the local church, the local congregation. The problem is, and here's where it really comes down to it, is that inviting someone to church is not evangelism. Especially as we pointed out last week that most things that a church does in a worship service are not actually evangelistic. They're not designed and are generally very ineffective in bringing someone who is not in the faith at all, someone who doesn't have any background. It doesn't bring them into the faith via a single worship service or even several worship services for that matter. Evangelism is sharing good news. I mean, literally, that's what evangelism means. In Greek, it means good newsing or sharing good news. Now, here's the deal, is that good news is just that. It's good news. It's not a litany of facts. Sharing the whole story of this, and this, and this, and this, and this is how someone gets quote-unquote saved is not necessarily and is generally not good news. It's a litany of facts. Biblical evangelism is different than modernity's version of evangelism. I want to take just a moment to take a brief look, and I mean a very brief look, at what is biblical evangelism. Now, if I ask someone, if I ask one of you at this point, and you stop the video, and I say, what is evangelism? What's the biblical mandate for evangelism? And not the mandate for, but what does evangelism look like? What are we being commanded to do? Matthew 28, 19, and 20 is probably going to come into your answer somewhere. Now, the whole Romans road of evangelism, which you may or may not be familiar with, parts of Romans, all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God. The gift of God is Jesus Christ, and that may come in there. But probably Matthew 28, 19, and 20, and the Gospel of John, where Jesus says to go and make fruit, those might be in there. But in neither of those cases, and in fact, there's only one real case where we are told what it means to do evangelism, what we're really called to do. And that one place is Acts 1:8. Jesus looks at his apostles one last time, and he tries to get it through to them. What am I calling you to do? I am calling you to be my witnesses. Now, what's a witness? A witness is someone who testifies, if you will, about their personal experience, something they saw, something they experienced, and that's what Jesus called his apostles to do. Go tell people about your experience with me, of the resurrection, and etc. Witnessing. Now, of course, when you hear the word witnessing, if you're old school, my age, then witnessing meant, it's just a code word for evangelism, knocking on doors and saying, do you know Jesus? But witnessing is not the same as knocking on doors and, doing the do you know Jesus thing. Being a witness is telling your personal experience. But a witness to what? That's the real question. And that's where we as a church often get very hung up. We're called to be a witness, but a witness to what? And so I want to invite you to try this week. Ask a couple of your church leaders when they're by themselves. Don't ask them in front of a group. This can be moderately embarrassing or quite embarrassing depending on who you're talking to. Ask this specific question. Tell me about your relationship with Jesus Christ. And then just sit back and listen. Because in my experience, and I've been doing this survey, if you will, for a lot of years across the nation with everyone from clergy to laity, church leaders to never been a leader, etc. And you know what the response almost always is? They tell me all about their experience with the church. They tell me how the church was there for them when their parents died, or when a child died, or when they crashed and burned. Or they tell me about that they were raised in the church, and the church has created a foundation for them, and etc. And it goes on. And the church is the center of their faith. And although a case can be made, as Paul has put it, that the church is the body of Christ, the church isn't Jesus Christ. And a relationship with the church does not equal a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, hang on a minute. I am not saying that all these people I spoke to weren't Christian. And I'm going to tell you the people you speak to, and if they come forth with telling you about the church, I'm not telling you that they're not Christian. What I'm telling you is that this is a problem. I'm not telling you they're not Christian, but I'm telling you this is one of the key reasons the church is in so much trouble in North America today, because we are practicing Churchianity. Let me tell you about my experience with the church. Jesus said, be a witness to what? The resurrection, to me, to etc. And if you look later on in chapter 1, when the apostles gathered to replace Judas, they're looking for someone who has an experience of Jesus Christ from the time of the baptism to the resurrection until he was taken up to heaven. They're looking for someone who can share, and it says, be a witness to his resurrection. That's specifically what they're looking for. Witnesses to Jesus Christ. And you see, the world outside the church walls is not at all interested in having a relationship with the church. Remember, the church has a pretty negative reputation. Ask the average person why they don't go to church, those who are not going to church. Ask them why they don't go to church. The number one reason across the United States is filled with hypocrites. Church doesn't have a good reputation. They're not looking for a relationship with the church. They're looking for a relationship with something much, much more powerful. The problem comes when the average Christian cannot articulate their relationship with Jesus Christ. That's a huge issue. Now, if you ask the average person to tell you about why they don't do evangelism, The most common response is that they can't articulate their faith. That doesn't even enter their mind. Their most common concerns is they don't know enough Bible, they don't know enough theology, they don't know enough about the church, etc. They don't know all the stories and so on. The truth is, though, is that very few people out there, outside the walls of the church, have any real interest in our old book. We can't get our own people to read it. Do you really think we have a whole lot of folks out there just dying to read the scriptures? It's not happening. And if they're not interested in our Bible, I can assure you they are even less interested in our theology. They don't want to know or don't care about the atonement theory or the Trinity or etc. The people of the world want to know God. They don't want to know more about God. They want what we say we can deliver. But we seem unable to articulate just exactly what that is because we have difficulty sharing our own personal experience of Jesus Christ, our own personal experience of God and how God has intersected in our life. We can do that with the church and how the church intersected in our life, but not so much about how Jesus Christ intersected with our lives. That's one of the key reasons evangelism today is on the ropes. If we're going to do evangelism today, we're going to have to help our people to learn to articulate their experience, to be witnesses. The question is, how can we help our congregation learn to articulate their relationship with Jesus? Now, later on this week, I'm going to post another video that will introduce you to a tool. Now, it's nothing more than a tool. It is not the tool. It's just a tool that I've developed over the years. It's not in any of my books, but a tool that will help people learn to articulate their faith. Not a litany of facts, but what it is about Jesus Christ that gets them out of bed in the morning. And I'm going to share that tool with you later this week. But before then, I want you to wrestle with the question, how could you help your congregation, how could you help the leaders in your congregation find a way to articulate their faith? I want to hear your ideas on how you could do this, what tools you would use or would want to develop or need to develop. And it might be good for you to articulate your relationship with Jesus Christ. And in fact, that's one of the discussion questions for this week. So be looking for that video. But until then, wrestle with the question, post, write it some discussion. How could you help others to find a way to articulate their faith?